Hey everybody, welcome to TFS number 20. TFS, the Fractal Standard, is a daily variety show that's an offshoot of my main website, fractaljournal.com, where you'll find stories, ideas, webcomics, and more. If that sounds up your alley, go ahead and give it a look over if you'd be so kind. A couple of videos back, I was talking about the concept of garbage language, which is this kind of frilly, feel-good buzzword talk that happens in corporate America, and it came to my attention via an article by Molly Young in New York Magazine in their Vulture subsection. And I found this to be interesting because it's just reflective of a certain culture and mindset that has developed that permeates all throughout our life, not just in the business world. However, there is a critique of this on Slate Magazine written by a fellow by the name of Mark Morgione. The article is called Defending Garbage Language, the Silly Corporate Terminology That Seriously Works. And he argues that, hey, this stuff is actually useful because it saves time, because it encapsulates complex ideas into these kind of simple words that help professionals communicate with each other. But I find this argument to be kind of, moot and inaccurate, because Ms. Young actually had already made the distinction that, no, we're not talking about jargon, which is useful. It's this kind of buzzy language. And, okay, so to make the strongest case for Mr. Morgione, let's look at how perhaps she had actually been describing jargon. So one of the terms that she had a special scorn for was parallel path, and he's saying that actually means quite a specific thing, a specific way of prioritizing tasks to do in tandem, and it's not just simple, multitasking. So in parallel, without either blocking each other. It's more descriptive than saying do both at the same time, and much quicker than saying these two tasks are related in their end goal, but independent of one another. Please push each as far as you can go, and we'll go with whatever comes to fruition first. Now, I think he's being incredibly verbose to demonstrate that there's this complex idea being held by this parallel process business, but it is a fair criticism of her point that this is garbage language. However, I think it's not even necessarily the fact of the distinction between jargon and garbage language that's the matter here. I think that jargon becomes garbage language when it is overused and it becomes a crutch for basically having nothing to contribute. Also, the further points that he makes about it kind of being this euphemism that softens the blow of relating your incompetence to your superiors and coworkers as in not understanding a topic actually is not a valid point, because you need to be honest and upfront, and we need to develop a business culture that's comfortable with people having a lack rather than feeling the need to hide it and soften the blow of, hey, I don't know what's going on, I'm going to find out and help me. So yeah, that's kind of my criticism of the criticism. I still don't like this buzzy buzzword culture that we're in. Buzzy buzzword culture. That's not very clever there, Alex. But then again, in my defense, I've been awake for quite some time. So, apparently the Enlightenment is racist, again, from Slate Magazine, which is a left-leaning magazine, and it was moved from left-leaning to left, actually, by an organization on the internet called, oh goodness, what was it called? It was called allsides.com or something to that effect. Now, there was some interesting information that I didn't know about John Locke and Kant here. They did seem to be kind of moving with the times to form a more scientific basis on thinking about race, which led to certain pseudosciences. Now, here's my position on this. there are racial distinctions that need to be looked at, especially for health reasons. Different populations of different, phenotypes respond differently to different kinds of viruses and all sorts of stuff. And certain populations are more prone to certain diseases. Like I think that Ashkenazi Jews are more prone to getting diabetes as well as are African Americans. And there's also certain populations more prone to getting sickle cell anemia. So, I mean, it's not entirely discounted, but the direction in which the Enlightenment thinkers took, Locke and Kant, these things was a little bit dark. That being said, you cannot really cast, aspersions on the Enlightenment, because you have to look at it in the context of its time and what the Enlightenment eventually led to, which is the underpinnings of, basically they put themselves in a trap. How can you call yourself an Enlightenment thinker and promoting the freedom of mankind if you yourselves are a slave owner? It led to that very line of thinking. And just because it came from people who were not able to live up to the very standards that they set does not mean that we need to cast aspersions. And as this author concludes, look at the legacy of the Enlightenment and see, it's racism prevalent even today. First of all, I don't really see that racism in this kind of, dramatic way that this is describing. And second of all, I don't see it having anything to do with the Enlightenment or us having to examine the Enlightenment. I think that this person's problem is with the politics of the proponents of the Enlightenment, and by attacking the foundations of their belief, they are kind of, in a roundabout way, trying to coax them to a different position, to the liberal position. And by liberal, I mean neoliberal position of all sorts of affirmative action, etc., especially since this is coming from Slate. So that's my 2 cents on this argument. I want to go over this article in more depth when I have time, and I want to present what I found good about it as well, because, it's good to kind of be shoved out of your comfortable ideas about people you hold as luminaries. Okay? So, moving right along. I was listening to a newer Anthony Cumia installment. Anthony, as in of Opie and Anthony, who started his own radio show called Compound Media after, he had this falling out with Opie and he had the trouble over, I think it's SiriusXM, word of the last company he had worked for. But he had Jim Florentine and somebody else on, and they just started off the show, at least the clip that was on YouTube that was recently uploaded, filleting Trump. And one of the funny things that I thought came out of this was, hey, you want cunty people to run the country because, you have to be tough and look tough to the world to survive and get things done. And Trump is cunty, and in essence, Putin is watching his back because Trump is cunty, and therefore, and for what Anthony means is that cuntiness will keep us safe from the Russians. Well, first of all, I don't think we have very much to worry about coming out of Russia as long as we don't continue to build bases and fuck around with their politics. I'm not saying that if there is in fact, something majorly wrong being done by Russia, that we don't act, but we shouldn't be putting economic sanctions and things which are basically done for our business interests rather than these claimed humanitarian things on the Russians. I originally come from Russia, and it kind of allows me to have an inclination to look at the other side more so than an American might, because say their situation is reversed and there was an American living in Russia and Russians were constantly saying these things about America. Well, an American would be able to say to the Russians, hey, well, actually, that's not the way it is. That's why I'm talking about this sort of thing. But I just found that funny because this idea of the tough guy, he listed Thatcher and other people as being necessarily good and necessary to the component of an effective leader. I believe is completely fallacious, and it's part of this popularity contest politicking that goes on. You don't have to be cunty and unnecessarily combative in order to get things done. In fact, that often hinders things and narrows the range of decisions that you can come to. Not just in terms of by alienating people, but by forcing you into kind of a constricted view of what you can do, because it's always going to be, hey, what's the most bellicose position I can take in order to sort of rule via fear, which, I mean, that's what all the presidents and things have been doing for the past few administrations with their drone strikes and other things, and does not seem to be promoting a very harmonious world. It does not seem to be stopping terrorist attacks from happening on the United States soil. So there's my evidence for why I said what I just said. In Diorama. Speaking of the Opie Anthony show, it is useful to listen to these old clips because it gives you kind of a continually updated understanding of recent events and things, as well as gives you insights into broadcasting, because a lot of times they just talk about, their craft. And one thing that Opie mentioned on a clip I listened to the other day was, he said, oh, well, we obviously read these news articles before we go on. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I do. And this helped give me confidence in doing what I do here, talking about current events through these stories that I find. Because I kind of had this kind of notion of just pure creativity where I don't draw from these other sources. But obviously, in terms of getting to grips with the world, that's sort of impossible. I'd have to be running around like in my reporter gear, my tan jacket, with my fedora, like crazy with my little notepad to get half of this information. So this social commentary based on news that you see from various sources, it is a valid thing to do. And Opie and Anthony made a great show out of it, as do many people continue to do to this day. And just hearing that, was very useful. So that's why I encourage everybody to listen to all kinds of shows and things, because it can help you in your endeavors, not just provide you with, trivia and fun. Whew. Yeah. This is my last Polaner beer. It's making me sad. And I know I'm infuriating German speakers by calling it Polaner, because I'm pretty sure it's Polliner. But I live in the South, and it's how we talk. And I kind of also ham it up Polaner because it's just, I don't know. It's something that's fun for me to do. Yeah. So, not too many more topics that I had in mind. I'm pretty much rounding this off. I'm going to leave with one final thought. The whole Opie and Anthony breakup. And yes, I am quite the fanboy. I keep on mentioning them. But it is kind of sad because, obviously, I am on the side of, hey, Opie is a little bit crazy and overly combative. But as I've been listening more and more, it seems that Opie was the reason that Anthony got into radio. And, not got into radio, but he was instrumental in helping he recognized Anthony's talent. And, one of the complaints Opie was making was, hey, you never hang out at my house, you never come over. And, being somebody that helped establish someone's career and then not feeling like you had a good interpersonal relationship could be harmful. And I sound like a total fag right now, but I'm just trying to look at all the perspectives possible, because I think that it's the dynamic of Opie being kind of like the straight man, and then Anthony and Jim, playing off of that, made the show what it is. And as much as I love Anthony solo, as well as his new hosts, and as much as I like Jim Norton and Sam doing their show, there's just something nice in going back in time and listening to, the old crew going at it. So if there's any O&A fans and they have any feelings about this, go ahead and comment below. I'm gonna go now before this degenerates into complete babbling. Hopefully, as I keep saying, these will get better as they go along and more time opens up. The beginning parts of the year are always rough to me for various personal reasons. But hey, if you like what you saw, subscribe, hit the like button, and feel free to comment whatever you want. Again, my main website is fractaljournal.com, and thanks so goddamn much for listening.